Vengeful, Chapter 2, Downhill. Key fob in hand, Abigail Davies, 32, dressed in a crisp, perfectly tailored navy blazer dress, accented with gold-toned buttons for a touch of class, hit the lock button on her sleek BMW, then turned on her shiny new heels and started out of the large concrete parking garage. Springing her step, Abigail caught Henry, the middle-aged maintenance man, admiring her shapely curves as she breezed past the elevator he was working on. "Good morning, Henry." Embarrassed, Henry busied himself with repolishing the elevator doors he had just cleaned. "Morning, Miss Davies." Mood upbeat, Abigail added, "Have a nice day." Yeah, you too, thank you," Henry stammered. Smiling brightly, Abigail took the stairs up and out of the damp structure and into the promising light of the new day. It was obvious Henry was surprised that she had remembered his name. After all, most of those who worked here did not. It was important to her to recognize everyone, whether they were a simple janitor or the president of a prestigious firm, because in Abigail's mind, everyone she came in contact with had value. Face to the sun, Abigail took a moment to enjoy the warmth of the day before returning her attention back to the clean, ornate building that rose up from the well-manicured grounds. Nestled within a mix of tall, decorative grasses, lush shrubs, and muted-colored gravel were various walkways which carved out pathways throughout the sprinkling of non-native shade trees. The Enchantment Mental Health Facility sat like a beacon to those who struggled from the burden of a troubled mind. Everything about the pristine building and luxurious grounds were deliberate in their design, ensuring that the man-made sanctuary soothed frayed nerves and set the troubled soul at ease. Abigail took note that nothing was out of place here, nor anything left to chance in this well-groomed haven for the mentally disturbed. Starting down one of the various paths, Abigail made her way to the main doors of the facility. Inside the institution, it was much the same. The walls were painted with varying shades of soft pastels, and calming works of art and greenery greeted her at every turn. Soothing music played just loud enough to further enhance the desired feel of serenity. Most patients who came to the Enchanted Hospital came of their own accord, took regularly scheduled appointments, and lived, for the most part, a normal life with minimal assistance for their mental health needs. A frown furrowed Abigail's brow as she looked up at the massive structure. As beautiful as it appeared, the facility had a dark side. There were those who lived on the 4th and 5th floor along the hallways, secured by large doors, security keypads, and locked individual rooms. Housed on those two levels were patients who, in the minds of the administration and various psychologists, were best cared for if they were hidden away, treated, and monitored while confined against their will. Abigail shook off the dark mood and resumed her walk to the large metal doors. After all, in those professionals' opinions, these drastic means were necessary to ensure the patient's safety as well as protect the public should troubled patients encounter others in their disturbed state. Showing her badge to the security guard posted just outside the main door, Abigail offered him a sweet smile. "How are you today, Kurt?" "Can't complain. And you, Dr. Davies?" Kurt opened the door for Abigail, giving her a nod as she breezed past him. "Better than I deserve." Abigail answered as she continued on her way to the elevator. She stepped inside, punched the button for the 2nd floor, and waved at Kurt as the doors closed before her. The ride was smooth, took only a few seconds, and before she could readjust her bag on her slim shoulder, the heavy doors slid open and revealed an elegantly decorated level where many of the psychologist's offices were located. It had been a busy morning for Abigail. She had completed her morning ritual of exercise, breakfast, and catching up on the news, then arrived early for work in order to review today's clients' files before their upcoming sessions with her later today. Ready to take on the world, Abigail started down the hall, rounded the corner, and came up short when she spied her receptionist, Vera, an impressionable 20-year-old, who stood wringing her hands beside two uniformed cops at the open door of her demolished office. At the sight of her things scattered about the floor, Abigail was forced to clamp down her mounting anger. This was not the time or the place for that volatile emotion. "Vera, what's going on?" Tears in her eyes, Vera raced to Abigail. "Miss Davies, I'm so sorry. I thought I locked the door, but they said there was no forced entry. But I'm positive that I..." Calmly, Abigail took Vera's hands shaking into hers and held them. "It's okay, Vera. Just calm down and let's take this one step at a time, all right?" Vera trembled as she nodded several times. "Okay." Offering the two officers an apologetic smile, Abigail continued to encourage Vera. "Now, start at the beginning." Sucking in a quick breath, Vera looked at the floor. "I came in early to make coffee and to get your office ready for you. When I unlocked the door," Vera glanced up at the police, "because it was locked. I found it like that." Vera pulled her hand free and pointed at the open door. Officer Nelson, a man in his late 30s, came over to them. "Your assistant called and said there had been a break-in at your office. From what we can tell, there is no forced entry." Hysterical, Vera shouted, "I'm telling you, I locked that door yesterday." Lips pressed tight, the officer looked back at his partner and then at Abigail. "Someone else could have used a key to gain entry to your office, Dr. Davies, but the door was not tampered with." Vera started to protest, but Abigail shut her down. "Vera, could you get me a glass of water, please?" Happy for the distraction, Vera agreed and hurried off. Abigail turned to the officer. Has anyone but the person who turned my office upside down been in there?" Patterson, the younger officer with a camera in hand, piped up. "I had to take a few pictures for our report, but we were only in there for a few minutes before you arrived." Hand to her throat, Abigail nodded. "As you can imagine, I have some very sensitive information on file in my office. I would appreciate it if you could give me a little time to go through my things to see if anything is missing." Nelson snagged a card from his pocket and handed it to Abigail. "Of course. Please let us know when you're ready to finish the report." Taking note of his name on the thin line above his badge, Abigail offered him a pained smile. "Thank you, Officer Nelson. I will." The officers politely gathered their things and left, passing Vera as she made her way back to the requested water. "Miss Davies, I swear to you..." Clamping down her frustration, Abigail took the water from her assistant and laid a comforting hand upon the young woman's shoulder. "It's okay, Vera. No one is blaming you. Sometimes these things just happen. So much for the perfect day. Why don't you cancel my first appointment so I can sort this mess out?" Eager to please, Vera sprang into action. "Yes, Miss Davies. Let me know if you need anything. Anything at all." "Thank you, Vera. I will." Abigail stepped into her ruined office, shut the door behind her, and set her bag down on an overturned chair. Not how I pictured my day starting, Abigail thought as she started digging her way through the wreckage. A short time later, Abigail stood, arms wrapped tightly about her waist, her stance confident and elegant. She brushed back her thick blonde hair as her bright blue eyes stared out the window to scan the courtyard below. Distracted, Abigail reached up to her necklace. She ran her fingers over the polished, oddly shaped nugget at the end of a thin gold chain, a pendant that she had fashioned from a spent rifle cartridge. Remembering the day she had found it, Abigail's mind took her back to the horrendous shooting at the college. She was one of the counselors who had been called in to help grieving students. In the midst of one of her sessions, Abigail had spotted the flicker of her reflection under one of the chairs in the room they occupied. It was a strange thing to find in there, considering that the meeting place had not been anywhere near where the shooting had occurred. How far must it have traveled to find its way there? Once she was alone, Abigail picked up the spent cartridge and kept it, later turning it into the trinket she now wore. It was a constant reminder to her of that fateful day and the lives forever lost. Barging into Abigail's office, Michael Kitch, the facility administrator, hung on to the door handle, wheezing, his face flushed, his eyes searching as he staggered to catch his breath. Spotting Abigail, Kitch straightened, fixed his tie, and stepped into the room while closing the door behind him. "Miss Davies, I just heard your office was broken into?" Sad and nervous, she confirmed. It was. "Have you contacted the police?" Walking over to an overturned desk drawer, Abigail knelt and began gathering some of the discarded items. They left about an hour ago. Holding his position by the door, Kitch asked, "Do they have any idea how they broke in?" Abigail froze. "They?" Figure of speech. "Do they know who got in here?" "They took the surveillance tapes and will be going over them later this afternoon." Abigail scanned the toppled table, broken lamp, and strewn papers as she straightened. "I'm sure they will find something on the camera footage." Clasping her hands before her face, Abigail gently tapped the tips of her thumbs to her lips. "I certainly hope so. This is very unsettling." Kitch cleared his throat as he looked at the locked and undisturbed file cabinets. "Yes, of course. I'm sorry. Were any of our files taken?" "Do you mean any of the facility's client files?" "No. The only things that have gone missing belong to me." It could only mean one thing. Whoever had gained access to her office did it with the intention of getting back at her. Chapter 3. Careful what you ask for. Alone in the sparsely populated cafeteria, Luke sat quietly, then grimaced as he tossed a half-eaten sandwich down onto his tray. Uninterested in lunch, Luke pushed the discarded food away from him and stared down at the uneaten meal. He tried to forget about the unsettling memorial service, knowing he needed to focus on his upcoming class, but found that he could not. Why do I have this constant feeling of dread? Is it the nightmares, the lack of sleep, or just constant reminders that keep these battles alive in my rattled brain? The lines between reality and delusion were getting thinner by the day, and if he did not figure out how to stop the onslaught soon, he knew he would find himself back in that damn mental institution where Abigail Davies had held sway. "Mr. Bolton?" Startled, Luke looked up to find Rachel Harmon, nervously chewing on her lip as she stared down at him. "Could I speak with you?" Heart racing, Bolton stood up from the table too quickly and sent his chair skidding back. "Rachel, hi, I'm sorry, I've got to get to class." Luke slipped past her. "It'll only take a minute." Rachel followed after Luke as he escaped into the hall. Without a backward glance, Luke jumped into a steady stream of students who were migrating toward their next destination. A few feet from his class, Luke took out his keys, preparing to unlock the door, when Rachel's small hand took hold of his. "Please, this is important." Taking note of the curious glances exchanged by his waiting students, Luke looked down at Rachel's hand, gently moved it aside, and unlocked the door, letting his students filter inside. A low murmur began inside the classroom as Luke slowly guided Rachel and himself out of their curious view. "Rachel, now's really not a good time." Eyes sorrowful, Rachel studied Luke. "It's about Emily." The professor took a deep breath. "Rachel, we've talked about this. Your sister, no matter how troubled she is, was, she would want you to let this go." The disquiet in Luke's room grew. Agitated, Luke poked his head around the doorframe. "Open your books to page 178 and..." Luke's voice faded as his eyes took in the large whiteboard at the front of the class. Covered with multiple marker strokes in varying script, the board was obscured with a single message. "No peace. No peace. No peace. No peace. No peace." Luke stood in the doorway, frozen. Concern marring her youthful face, Rachel stepped up to Luke. "This isn't about Emily, Mr. Bolton. It's about you." Rachel took Luke by the arm and guided him back into the hall. I get that now, and I'm sorry for how I reacted the other day when you asked me for Emily's bracelet. Luke took an unsteady step back, undeterred. Rachel closed a space between them. I hadn't realized how close the two of you had become after everything that happened after the shooting. Smiling up at Luke, Rachel held a worn journal to her chest. Then yesterday, while I was getting ready for the memorial service, I went into Emily's room and found her journal. There were so many entries about her talks with you, her careful thoughts and words about how you helped her, how you tried to convince her that none of the things that happened were her fault. Fighting back tears, Rachel wiped at her eyes. Even though in the end, nothing any of us did was enough, it was hard for me to come to terms with that. Rachel offered Luke a pained smile. So I can only imagine how difficult this must be for you. It's no wonder you're still struggling to let Emily go. You fought so long and so hard in your attempts to save my sister. Wanting more than anything to assure the young girl, Luke sniffed as he tried in vain to steady his voice. Rachel, I'm fine, I promise. Digging into her purse, Rachel rummaged through the contents and retrieved a dainty charm bracelet, then offered it to Luke. No, you're not. And if you need this to help you say goodbye, then I'm happy to give it to you. Luke recoiled as he held up both hands. I can't take that. I never should have asked. A chill slid down Luke's spine as the small glass window tucked within the confines of his classroom door frosted over above Rachel's head. A whisper sounded beside Luke. Take it. Afraid, Luke shut his eyes tightly. Oblivious to Luke's struggle, Rachel continued. I gave this to Emily on her 16th birthday. She never took it off. I guess she told you about it in one of your long talks. The voices weren't real. Emily's ghost wasn't standing next to him. This was just PTSD messing with his head. Mr. Bolton? Jaw clenched, Luke opened his eyes to see the jewelry held out in Rachel's open hand. Rachel, you don't have to do this. You don't have to give that to me. Tears in her eyes, Rachel took Luke's trembling hand, turned it over, and gently placed her sister's charm bracelet into his open palm. I know you'll take good care of it, and you'll return it to me when you're ready. Luke swallowed hard as Emily slid away from him and stood beside her sister, a satisfied grin on her distorted face. Rachel closed his hand around the delicate piece of jewelry. Silent, Luke frowned down at his closed fist as Rachel cast a worried glance into his room full of agitated students. You'd better get in there. Lost for words, Luke nodded as Rachel moved past him, his voice working past the lump in his throat. Luke called to the young woman. Rachel? Yeah? Eyes locked on the charm bracelet, Luke gave her a subdued, thank you. Luke heard Rachel's soft retreat as she headed down the hall. Face grim, Luke studied Emily, now a fading shadow of her sister. Now a fading shadow as her form retreated down the dimly lit hall and vanished, like her sister. His soul tormented, Luke felt as if the cold metal burned in his palm. This was the last excuse he had. The last piece of the puzzle Luke did not want to complete. Yet in his troubled mind, he knew that if he failed to do what was asked, he would pay a far more horrific price than the one he had already suffered. That is Vengeful, Chapter 2 and 3. A new chapter drops 2 days from now. Comment below if you'd like to know more or any questions you have. Stay tuned. It's getting good.